Yo, what's good, guys? Inswain with Inswain Audio. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, you know the drill. Make sure to subscribe and join our family because I drop videos just like this every day. Who's doing it like that? Come on, man. Welcome. We missed you. Where you been? Anyways, today I'm going to be answering a question off of Reddit about why their mixes don't sound like other mixes when they compare them. And I'm sure you can relate to this. I can relate to this. We can all relate to this. We've been there. But let's go. All right, this person said, my mixes often lack highs compared to other stuff. I use a reference plugin, and at the beginning I try to adjust levels so it sounds okay to me. Sometimes after this, there's only small differences in the frequencies to the reference tracks, but often it lacks highs and even high mids from 2 to 3K up to 20K. If I now would just crank many elements up in highs, it would feel wrong to me. Where do you think is my mistake? Okay, so it sounds like they get their session pulled up. They do like a static mix, just adjusting the levels to get it to where they feel balanced. Then they compare it to a song that they think is similar or sounds good, and they realize that theirs is lacking in highs. It's a lot duller and darker, usually from 2 to 3K all the way on up to 20K. Then they said, if I would now just crank many elements up in highs. So I feel like they're saying if they just put a bunch of high-end EQ on each track or on the master track, if they just boost a bunch of highs to get it to match the reference, it would feel wrong to them. Where is their mistake? So it could be in a few things, but I would say the main thing is probably your listening environment. Your listening environment is probably has a lot of buildup in the high frequencies for whatever reason that may be. We can't know. It's a case by case basis. But if there's extra high frequencies in your room that you're listening in, then that means when you get it to sound good in that room, there's extra highs there. So you're actually compensating for that by removing highs to make it sound how you think it should sound. And then your mixes end up being dull. The problem is there's that buildup of highs. So if there's a lot of highs in your room, for you to get your mix to sound balanced, it needs to sound like there's a lot of highs in your mix because your room brings out extra highs, right? It would be the same of the inverse, where if your room is really dull, you would try to compensate for this by adding in too many highs, and then your mix would be too bright. So it's usually our mixes are an inverse of our environment, and that's probably the case here. So the solution for that is, in an ideal world, just get a better environment or fix the issues. That's not always possible. Let's be realistic. So in that case, continue doing what you're doing. Use a reference track that you know sounds good everywhere and match your song or make it similar to that. And it might sound weird in your room, but eventually you'll get used to it and you'll know that, okay, it's supposed to sound like there's too many highs in that song because there's too many highs in my room. So I know it kind of sounds weird in here, but it's going to sound good elsewhere because I matched it to a reference or references in an ideal case. Another thing that I thought of is they said if I just cranked many elements up in the highs. So don't necessarily just put like a high shelf boost on your master bus. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but it could be an issue of maybe just turn like the hi-hat and the cymbals or the things that live in the hi-hat range, maybe turn those up more in your mix and readjust your balancing that way, and you'll get an overall more highs and it'll feel more natural instead of just boosting the highs in everything. Now, that's not to say that that's not always a good idea. Sometimes it can be nice to put a high shelf. If we're going to be turning everything up, right, in the highs, you might as well just do it on the master, right? Whole nother discussion. So I'm not saying don't ever EQ your master or don't boost the highs on the master. I'm just saying that don't just do it lazily. Try to find where the actual issue is. Sometimes it's just a few of the instruments in the highs are a little too low. If you turn those up, the balance will feel better. You'll get the highs that you're missing, and everything else can stay how it was before unprocessed, and everything's just going to vibe together better. Another thing to consider is maybe the arrangement / production of your song doesn't call for it being as bright as your reference. Now, it sounds like this problem happens to them a lot, so the chances of this are pretty small. It's probably the other things I mentioned, but maybe this song or a few particular songs you're working on, maybe they just don't have many high-end elements. They're just songs that are naturally darker. And it is going to sound weird if you boost highs to match another song that has a million shakers and hi-hats and is a bright EDM pop song. Like, that was produced to sound brighter. So if you take your dark, ballad and try to match the EQ curve to that, of course it's going to sound wrong. We don't always want to match an EQ curve one-to-one to another song because guess what? That's another song. This isn't the same song. No two songs are going to have the same exact EQ curve, and that's okay. That's not what you want. Now, you probably want to be in the ballpark of something that has a similar genre, vibe, feel, production, arrangement, etc. You probably want to be in the ballpark, but not always. But it never needs to be exact. And that's one thing to keep in mind is they say like comparison is the thief of joy, like we get that, but in mixing, comparison is great because you're comparing your song to your references, and it can fix for problems like I mentioned earlier, like with your room, where if your room's off, you just get it to sound like your reference. It's going to sound off in your room, but it's like your reference, so you know it's going to work everywhere. So while comparison can be the thief of joy, and mixing it can be good, but you got to remember that these are different songs. So they're not going to be exactly the same. That's okay. References are meant to be copied one to one. They're meant to give you a ballpark of where you should be and make sure that you're on the right track. And if you want to go a little brighter or a little darker or a little louder, like you can veer off, but at least the reference shows you that center point, that true north, so you know where you're going and you can veer off consciously and intentionally, not by accident. And then because when you do things by accident, it usually isn't good, but when you intentionally break some rules, that's where you get great stuff. So anyways, I hope that helped you. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share. You know the deal, man. I appreciate it. We're going crazy. Thank y'all. I love y'all. My name is Inswain with Inswain Audio. And as always, I will see y'all tomorrow, man. Peace.